Hey, welcome to Tabletop Skirmish Games. I'm Lee, and in this video I'll show you how I painted Dagnai Holdensstock from Cursed City using mostly contrast paints. Here is Dagnai Holdensstock all ready to go, and I've primed him with a brush with the base Wraithbone paint, and I assembled him using the errata that came with the game. So they made a mistake in the main instructions. So if you do build him, make sure to use this errata. And in this video, I'll be painting him in line with this image supplied with the game. Usually I prime my minis with the Citadel Colour Wraithbone Contrast Undercoat Spray. And in this video, we'll mostly be using contrast paints over some metallics. And the brush I mostly use is the Army Painter Wargamer character brush. So let's get started right away with that Leadbelcher, and this is the base paint, and this is going to be going on all the metallic parts. And for this Kharadron Overlord, he's got a lot of metallic parts on him, so this is going to be one of the biggest parts of getting this model ready. And so I'm going in, just blocking in all these colours now. So this is going to take a fair bit of while to cover this, and I'm being quite generous with the paint here. I've wet it down a touch just so it kind of flows nice and easy, and I'm just spreading that around over all these metal bits. I'm trying to be quite careful, but there is a lot of stages of tidying up as we go through this model with the different stages, and so I'm just giving it a coat, getting it all on there, and making sure I cover all the areas. And on this kind of bit here that's blue, I thought I'd just make it all metal, so rather than just trying to pick out the metallic bits there, I thought I'd go all metal there. And also on these pauldrons, I thought these would be nice with a metallic look, and you'll see later that we go over these with contrast paints for some really nice effects. The next paint then is that base Wraithbone, and this is going to touch up all the areas now where we've gone over it with the Leadbelcher over the areas that we didn't want to be metallic. So just take your time and really examine the model, and that's one of the keys with the contrast paint, just keeping it really nice and tidy. Don't go over the lines, and try and keep those different blocks of colour, the dividing line between them, as crisp as you possibly can. And there we go, that's that stage of the model complete, and this took quite a while. I took my time, I didn't rush it, because getting this nice and neat is really going to be the key to getting a nice tabletop ready miniature. And now the first contrast paint we're going to use is the Contrast Talasar Blue, and this is a really beautiful colour blue, and this is going to go all over that kind of chest and stomach plate, if you like. That's going to go all over it, and we'll tidy it up again and just go over the buckles later on. So I'm giving that a nice generous coat all over there, that metallic blue. And then we're going to use the same paint on the material. So this is going to go on the sleeves and also on the big cloak, on the outside of the cloak. And so I'm being a bit more generous with the paint now. So I'm loading it up and then starting and ending my brush strokes where I want most of that paint to build up. And you can be quite generous with these large areas, and then just use your brush to push and pull that paint around so it builds up where you want it to the most. And so you want most of the paint to build up in the crevices and the creases, and anywhere where two bits of material overlap or kind of just a little bit raised when next to each other. And so you want that to pull and get a nice dark shadow in there. So I'm really making this contrast paint do all the work and pushing and pulling it around and getting it where I want it to go. And here you can see I've got quite a bit on the brush now, and it really wants to go in the crevices and the recesses on its own. So it really does a lot of the work for you. So just help it along, give it a little push and pull around, and then just be careful around areas like this, around the buttons. I'm just taking my time not to go over that metallic paint that we've done there, because they're going to be gold later on. And then just finish off over those metallic pauldrons on the shoulders. We want to give them a nice coat of this blue as well. Our next paint is a Contrast Flesh Tearers Red, and now you could use the Blood Angels Red, but I wanted something a bit richer and a bit deeper. And so I'm using this on the inside of the cloak later on, but at this stage, while I just wait for that blue to dry, I'm just going to put a little bit on the handle here of his axe. And so just taking my time now to get in there between the fingers, and try not to go over it. We can tidy up, and I do go back and forth a lot with this model, tidying it up. It's quite a fiddly model to paint actually, so that's important. And then back to the Talasar Blue, and a little tip that I saw on Guerrilla Miniature Games, that if your pot doesn't shut, just use the little thing, the little protector from your brush, and you can pop that in, and it keeps your pot open. So that was a really good tip from Ash at Guerrilla Miniature Gaming. So thanks for that, great tip. And now I'm going over this Talasar Blue again over the outside of the cloak. And I just want to do this to make that blue a little bit deeper, a little bit richer, and it definitely makes a difference doing the 2 coats like this. And I don't think you lose any of that contrast. You certainly don't lose any shadows either. And now we're going back to that base Wraithbone, and I'm touching it up again. And I do this an awful lot during this model. So back and forth, anytime I make a mistake, I kind of go back over it, correct it, and then let it dry before moving on to the next paint. Now we're going to take that Flesh Tearer's Red again, and this is going to be for the inside of the cloak now. So it's really important when I did that touching up stage with that Wraithbone that I made that line between the blue and red really crisp, because now when we put this red on, it's really going to stand out if that line isn't crisp. And so I'm just taking my time, using the side of the brush here to get it nice and straight, and then really moving the model around so that it's nice and easy. I can get myself in a nice comfortable position, bracing my arms on the table, and really be nice and steady with the stroke there. And I'm trying not to go over that blue, so I'm really taking my time. I haven't got too much paint on the brush. I'm really using it like a felt tip pen at this stage. That's why I'm going back and forth to the pot quite often. But when I get to these larger areas of the inside of the cloak, I can be a bit more generous with that paint. And then just as before, we can push and pull it around and get it into those recesses. But underneath, we want it to be quite dark anyway, and so we can put a little bit more paint than we normally would. And then back to this bit, reduce that paint, thinking again like a felt tip pen. You don't want to be too much on at a time. And then really taking my time here around this section, around the collar. So don't want to make any mistakes here going over that blue. So I made sure it was nice and crisp with the Wraithbone, and then once that dried, go over it with this nice Flesh Tearer's Red. And again, moving that model so that I'm always in the same position or a comfortable position with my brush, and I can really take my time, and I've got complete control of where I'm putting the paint. I found this quite a tricky model to paint actually, and the ones I've done so far for Cursed City have been difficult too. So really is a lot of going back and forth with that tidying up stage, more than I've done in the past with the Warcry warbands that I've painted. So this took me a lot longer than I'd normally take to paint a model. You know, good couple of hours this one took, mostly because of waiting for it to dry and then going and doing the tidying up with the Wraithbone. But I was really happy with how it came out, and it's worth taking that time to make sure it's neat. And that's why I go back with this Leadbelcher now, and I go over those buckles and just making sure that those raised buckles have got a nice coat of Leadbelcher, because we want to paint those gold later on. So again, turning that model so it's helping me keep my kind of arms braced on the table and in complete control. And now we're on to the next paint, the Contrast Black Templar, and I'm starting here with the gloves. And here on the gloves, there's lots of recesses, so I'm just judging how much paint I put on. I don't want to put too much on, because I don't want it to run on the other sections and go over that Flesh Tearer's Red we've already done. But I don't want too little either, where it'll be quite patchy. So just getting that balance right with these contrast paints. But once you've done them and experimented with a few models, you soon get a good idea of how much you can put on for different sections. And so here in the fingers, we've got those recesses. We want it to run in there. And the Black Templar is really great. It works really cool for like a leather effect, a black leather. I really like how it works. But I'm also using it on this kind of pipe here that leads from the gun to the backpack. And I'm going to give this a little dry brush later. So this will be a little bit metallic, but not as metallic as the other parts, like the gun itself and that backpack. Because I wanted to break up the metallic look of this. But also didn't want it to look like rubber. Right, now we're going with some Nuln Oil Shade, and this is going over all the boots. I'm going to go over pretty much all the metal, and this is going to give us a little bit of a kind of shade in those recesses. As we start building colour up on this over the next stages, we're really going to benefit from this little bit of shade that we put on. And then on this chest plate, I'm also putting a fair bit of that Nuln Oil to give us some nice shadows. In the beard too, so really get it in there, work it around, avoid that face, because you don't want to get that over that nice Wraithbone we've got on the face. Quite a bit on the axe, and you can see I'm wiping my brush off on the edges of the model, and that scrapes the paint off. And then just like with the contrast paints, this Nuln Oil and these shades like to go in the recesses, but just help it along by pushing and pulling it around, and then really trying to start and finish your brush strokes where you want most of it to build up. So you can see this is going on pretty much every part of the model almost. I'm avoiding that little bit of rope, avoiding the head, but I'm also going over the material, and this is going to give this a little bit more depth to it. So I'm going over that blue and the red and giving it a nice coat, and on this, even on this cloak, I'm going to give it a nice coat of that Nuln Oil, and I'm trying to give it a nice even coat, and this is really going to just richen it up, if that's a word, and just, you know, it's not really going to add a lot of shadow, but it's just going to deepen that tone. Right, now we're going on to some skeleton horde, and this is going to be for the material for the trousers, and also for that roll of parchment he's carrying on his leg there. And so we're just giving that a nice coat. Be quite generous with this skeleton horde. It dries quite light, but if you're getting in the shadows, you want to put quite a bit in there, and you can get a nice contrast. And there's just a little bit on that other leg, so I'm just making sure that gets a nice coat too. This skeleton horde's also perfect for the rope on this little winch here of the harpoon, so I'm putting that on there, making sure that gets a good coat, and again being more generous where I want the shadow to build up. Now it's back to some contrast black Templar, and here I'm just doing little thin lines all along the edge of the blade there. So that section at the front of the axe, I'm just putting little lines of black along it, and I haven't done this before, but I thought I'd try it out to see what it looked like. So I've done that on both sides, and this is just going to break up the monotony of metal and give some different texture. And then I'm also doing a little bit on the top section of the axe. And then now we're moving on to contrast Guilliman Flesh, and this is going to go over the face, but also some of the metal, as you see later on, to give us a nice brassy effect. But with the face, I'm starting where I want most of this to build up, which is in that eye socket and around the nose. And you can see I'm using that texture of the model to kind of help me get the paint off the brush and in the eye socket, and then also just running it along there, trying to get it to build up underneath this kind of band that runs around his head. And then on the top, I'm just kind of making it a little bit more even, but trying to push it so that it goes into the areas where it joins other parts of the material, where you'd naturally get a little bit of a darker line. And now we're starting on the metalwork, and this is going to give us a real kind of aged brassy look. And I really like using Guilliman Flesh over the Leadbelcher. It really works nicely. But here I'm kind of not putting it on in a solid colour. I'm almost just sketching it on with little lines and flicking it in and just building it up, picking out little bits. I'm not going over every section, but just kind of making it up as I go along here. Actually, I didn't really plan which bits were going to be which colour for the metals, but just as I go, I'm just thinking that would look good there. And then those little kind of, I don't know what they are, the little cans kind of hanging off, I thought that would work. And then on the gun, I'm picking out the like little canister and the more rounded bits, but I'm leaving the bandings and like the straps and different parts that I want to be silver or really gold. I'm leaving that. So I'm just picking out those bits that I think would look good. Same with the axe. I'm not going to go over the blade. I'm just going to go over this kind of ornamental section, and then going to grab some contrast Gryph Hound orange, and then the same thing, not going over it really thick, almost like a felt tip, just sketching on little lines, little blobs here and there. And I'm picking out mostly this orange on the gun or the harpoon, and I'm picking out that canister and that round ball, and then but the raised like lip that goes around, I want that to have like almost a highlight, so I'm leaving it silver. I'm trying to avoid that. And then also I want it to, when you look at it, I want to see some gold, some silver, some brassy colour, some orange. So I'm just eyeing it up as I go along and making sure those colours don't overlap. And then I'm taking the Nazdreg yellow, and this is the one that's going to give us the gold. So here I'm going over areas I've already put a bit of that Guilliman Flesh on, and just layering this up in these different stages gives a real nice age look to the metal, but it doesn't look like really gold or really silver or really brass. It looks quite unique. I really like doing this. This is a really fun technique. And here I'm just picking out the bits I want to look like kind of stand out as really gold, like this little handle at the back. I've gone over the little keyhole and this little section here at the bottom. So just picking out those bits that I think would look good gold and stand out. And on the gun, not so much, just a little bit here on this kind of strap and the little straps around there. And then on the front, just going over the little buckles we did on the breastplate and giving those a little coat too. And again, not too much paint, so just like felt tip pen. And then there's a key here hanging down, so I want that to just be completely gold. So I'm giving that a nice coat. And then finally, the little buttons on the outside of the blue cloak, they'll get a little bit of gold too. And then I'm going to take some layer paint, some Stormhost silver, and we're going to do some dry brushing. So I've got this old scruffy brush. I'm taking a little bit of paint on my brush, then I'm working it into some kitchen towel or kitchen paper, getting off as much as I can. That brush is nice and dry. Then I just test it on my hand to get an idea of how much is going to come off, and then just go over the edges of the weapon that I think are going to catch most of the light. And then just along the front there, I'm going to go over that little raised area, and that's going to break up where we did those black lines earlier and the kind of darker Leadbelcher, and this is going to give it a nice highlight and some nice texture too. And then on here we've got the harpoon, the kind of spear at the end there, just giving that a little generous dry brush, because that's going to be the bit that's going to catch most of the light. And then I'm just going over really gently over the whole weapon, so just catching those raised areas. And I'm not making it really bling or really shiny. I just want to give it a little highlight, very subtle, and because I really want all those different colours to come through. But going over with this Stormhost over the whole thing, I think really ties it all together nicely. And just be careful not to go over the blue, so be very careful. That's why I chose this smaller brush, and the same around the face. Be careful when you do the beard not to get the face. And now we're taking some contrast Nazdreg yellow again, and I'm just going over the areas that I want to stand out a little bit more gold. So I want this beard to be really gold, and also the front of the buckle, so I'm going to give that a little bit more, and also there's buckles on the chest plate, so I'm just going over those a little bit. And then we're going to take some Leadbelcher, and this is going to go over the skeleton. We've pretty much finished the dwarf now, so now I'm going over the skeleton that he's standing on, just painting the helmet in Leadbelcher. Then we're going to take some skeleton Horde and use this to paint all the skull and the kind of rib cage you can see under his foot. And again, be generous for the areas where there's lots of recesses, because this will be quite light when it dries, but if you can get enough of it in the recesses, you get a nice shadow too. Then I'm going to take contrast Basilicanum grey, and this is going to be for the earthy part of this plastic, and this is going to be on a tiled base, as you'll see later on. And so I'm just popping that on there, and then to finish I'm going to take some Typhus Corrosion, and then this is going to go over that helmet, and this helmet's dry, so make sure that Leadbelcher's dry. But this Typhus Corrosion is great technical paint. It really gives an old rotting look to the metal. It's awesome. And now I'm going to take some layer Palid Wych Flesh. You could use white, but I've gone for something a bit more off-white. And this is a tiny dot that I'm just putting on the kind of eyepiece that he's got over his eye there. And then when that's dry, I'm going to take some Nihilakh Oxide and put a very small amount on. And this is going to be very subtle, but when we put this next paint, the Talasar blue, over the top of that, you get a really nice effect. And not glowing as such, but it kind of gives you a little kind of hint that it might be. And being really gentle here, hardly any at all, and just making it so that you can still see some of that Palid Wych Flesh coming through. And then that model's pretty much painted now, so I've took it off the stand. I'm just going to snip away this little peg that holds it in place, so being really careful here. And here's a base that I made before with the tiles, and this matches the tiles from the game. And then we can stick him on there, and our model is complete. And there he is, all finished, painted with mostly contrast paints to a tabletop ready standard, and I'm really happy with how he turned out. I think using the contrast paints over the metallic Leadbelcher gives us some really nice effects, and I think the Talasar blue came out really nice on that cloak, and just adding the Nuln oil really gave it some depth. But it's these different colours on the metal that I really like the most. And here's the axe, just putting those black lines on, broke that up a little bit, just gave it a little bit more texture and a different kind of colour to break up the metallics, and adding that yellow kind of skeleton Horde colour to the rope on the harpoon, really tied in with the red and blue. Using that red, blue and yellow, there's a nice trio of like prime colours, so that works really well when we're looking at like colour wheels and things like that. We can get a really nice effect there. If you'd like to see how I made the base for the Cursed City miniatures, then I've done a separate video on that, and that's up on the channel, so you can check that out if you like. And I'll make sure to put all links to all the paints I've used in the description below, and there'll be links to Element Games, where you can save up to 20%, and there'll be affiliate links, but it won't cost you anything extra. In fact, you're going to save that money, and for every sale made through an affiliate link, I get a small commission, and that's going to help me do loads more videos like this. So thanks so much for that support, I really appreciate it. If you like this kind of content and would like to support the channel, then please check out my Patreon page, and thanks to everyone who's joined so far. It's really awesome. We hang out on Discord, talk about the hobby, share ideas and help each other out, and you'll get some perks there that you're not going to find anywhere else. So I'll put a link in the description, and it'll be great to see you there. I hope you enjoyed the video and this gave you an idea of how you can paint these Cursed City models with mostly contrast paint, and if you want to check out some of the other models I've done, then they'll be up on the channel too. But thanks so much for watching. Please like if you like it, subscribe for more videos like this, and don't forget to hit the notification bell to join me next time on Tabletop Skirmish Games.